Hello and welcome to Season 12, Episode 16 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop, and I'd like to say hello to our two listeners.
We have more than that. We just had a spike in downloads yesterday, actually. I was just looking at this just a second ago. There were, um, let me see, 233 downloads yesterday for some reason. So somebody was out there maybe downloading one episode 233 times. So maybe it is just one listener
Or,
and they really enjoyed one particular episode.
or if they downloaded the entire catalog. I don't know how many
That's
episodes.
true. Well, we're
Because
probably
several
pretty close
seasons.
to that, yeah.
So maybe just downloaded everything. So they could archive it in case they
Yes.
pay or something.
In case they want to blackmail us for
Maybe
any reason.
somebody should try to undermine us. Our
Mm-hmm.
own words.
That's so true. We are, of course, reading The Closing of the American Mind by Allan Bloom, this time talking about the 60s. So we've moved from this very long discussion of sort of the evolution of education in the university up to what he sort of considers, and I think he's right, is a sort of critical moment or critical period of time in the American educational history, which is the 1960s, when things were just absolutely turned on their heads. And I thought this was, I think, one of the best chapters
Yes.
because it was definitely like the most personal chapter because he lived through all of this craziness. He was at Cornell, as we'll talk about, during all this sort of like get rid of Western Civ protests and things like that. And some of the stories he tells, I'm like, oh, I almost can't believe that actually happened.
Really?
Because I mean, I know that it happened, but it's so absurd. Um, I think it is. I don't know.
The things that he describes are very similar to things that have happened in the last year.
Right. No, I agree. That's part of the reason why it was so surprising. It's like, oh, these were the exact same things that were
Oh,
happening back in the 1960s, and we didn't do anything about it. And we put those people who were protesting in such a way, we put them in charge of the universities.
absolutely.
That nothing was done to prevent it from happening again. We just sort of capitulated and made it worse, if
Yes.
anything. Yeah.
100%. And going back to our original comments, and weaving in the 60s,
Hmm.
one of my favorite philosophical statements in 60s music was from Janis Joplin.
Hmm.
Freedom is another word for nothing left to lose.
Mm.
And that is true of anyone trying to use my words against me. What are we going to do? Embarrass me with what I've already said? I have no, the fact that I have no power,
Hmm.
influence over anyone or any hope,
Mm.
or possibility of being in a position where my words might affect me in the future is liberating in some ways.
Mm.
Now, having said that, it is important for us both to remember if anybody tries to use our words against you,
Hmm.
that we both agree that the words were mine and that you did not consent to the stupid things that I said,
Of course, of course.
which is it has the benefit of also being true and accurate.
True. I do like the way sorry, were you about to say something?
No, I'm gonna get a sip of
Oh,
coffee.
okay. I do like the way he starts this chapter. It's a great hook for this chapter. He says, "You don't have to intimidate us," said the famous professor of philosophy in April 1969 to 10,000 triumphant students supporting a group of black students who had just persuaded us, the faculty of Cornell University, to do their will by threatening the use of firearms as well as threatening the lives of individual professors. A member of the ample press corps newly specialized in reporting the hottest item of the day, the university, muttered, "You said it, brother." The reporter
Mm,
had learned a proper contempt for the moral and intellectual qualities of professors. Servility, vanity, and lack of conviction are not difficult to discern.
yeah.
And he goes into exactly what led up to this, but just the complete capitulation of the professors to give in to every single one of these demands by these crazy radicals is actually insane. It's remarkable that this transpired the way it did.
Well, and the only real difference from then, we'll talk about this a number of times, I'm
Mhm.
sure, in this episode, from then and now is that the leadership and the professors are really active participants and really supportive of these efforts. Now, in what he's describing in the 60s was at the forefront of this effort, um, and we'll talk about the details of that. And as he describes it, a lot of the professors are just kind of like going along. not that they really are true believers or leaders of it,
Hmm.
uh, but now it's the professors that are really leading the charge,
Right.
and the students like, oh, okay, yeah, right on, and because it's the professors that well now they're like my age, so they
Hmm.
grew up in the '80s, went to college in the '80s or '90s, and I remember that those '60s types protests were always like beatified. If you
Hmm.
talk about American history, and when you're being taught in modern American history, it's always, oh, these wonderful, protesters and fighting for civil rights, and they got equality for African Americans
Hmm.
and all that. They didn't do all that, but
Hmm. Yeah.
but so I think those people that are my age are now in power, and the people that really want to push this envelope even further. But
Right.
yeah, like you said, it's a great hook to get you into it
Hmm.
because it's a such a apt description of the dynamics involved
Hmm.
in this transition
Yeah.
from an effective university system to just capitulating to these mobs.
Right. And kind of tying it into the last chapter, he says this is essentially the same thing that happened to the German universities, where you have
Yes.
this really highly ideologized, young student population that's just very aggressively against what they see as this sort of bourgeois hierarchy. And he says it's this Nietzscheanized, Heideggerianized left. The unthinking hatred of bourgeois society was exactly the same in both places. This is in the bottom of 314 into 315. Says a distinguished professor of political science proved this when he read to his radical students some speeches about what was to be done. They were enthusiastic until he informed them that the speeches were by Mussolini.
Uh,
So he's like reading these speeches, like, "Oh yeah, that's great. Sort of the will to power. We need to take back, the university and take back what's ours." He says that's really the same spirit that's animating them. And of course, all the leftists would be, "Oh, well, we can't be agreeing with Mussolini," except that they do, and very
well,
clearly.
yeah, I mean, in fairness, it's funny when people like read back speeches from Clinton,
Hmm.
Hillary, or Bill Clinton, especially now about immigration,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh my gosh, that's racist, So I mean, but they're really articulating even a stronger line than what Trump has done, and some of the let's see, how do I want to say this? The speeches of populists, whether they're right wing or left wing, are always going to have, if they're popular, they're going to have some reasonable elements to them,
Mm-hmm.
some persuasive elements,
Right.
at least in the time, So, or they'll be using some universal beliefs or values
Right.
that hold true before that era and after that era. Just because they misuse them doesn't mean that they're not separately compelling statements. Um,
Mhm.
and Mussolini was a complicated character, but not a good person. And the Italians ultimately murdered him,
Yeah.
uh, hung him from the light post, if I
Right.
remember.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a good point. I do like. I'm going to backtrack a little bit
Yeah.
on
Sure.
314. He mentions how the professors just were not like mentally in a position to resist this effort from the student activists at the time. He says, of course, anyone who is a professional contemplative holding down a prestigious and well-paying job, and who also believes there is nothing to contemplate, finds himself in a difficult position with respect
Hmm.
to himself and to the community. So it's like if you don't believe in what you're doing, you can't really bring yourself to fight to
Right.
preserve it.
Right.
You're contemplating things. You don't really believe in it. You just kind of surrender. Um,
Yeah. Because what's
and,
the
it,
point?
it,
So I'm not doing anything important.
yeah.
I don't care about what I'm doing. Yeah.
And then on 315, he makes the point where he's talking about, well, the students, realize this.
Hmm.
And he says a few students discovered that pompous teachers who catechize them about academic freedom could, with a little shove, be made into dancing bears.
Hmm. Yeah.
They and like what was it the Portland University, where a lot of this really crazy, bizarre Portland State University, I think it was, the really crazy campus takeover
Hmm.
in modern woke history. This was before COVID. You probably don't even know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, I don't remember this.
Where they had it was Barry, was it, no, what's his name? It's one of the Weinsteins.
Mm.
who's a lefty, but he's been on Joe Rogan several times. But they had uh, a day, I forget what they called it, but all of the white students and white professors had to be off campus, like out of the housing units, out of because it was a day of safety
What?
for the non-white people. And
Huh.
then there were just a couple professors who are like, yeah, I object. I'm not a danger
Yeah,
to anyone. Well, why are you excluding me? This
that's
is
crazy.
this is patently racist. And they had like roving gangs of um uh what do you say? Overweight, um, purple-haired,
Mm.
gender confused people
Hmm.
roaming around campus, like five or six at a time with like baseball bats and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yelling and screaming about safety, this and that, and the president of the university, like cried and apologized for institutional racism and sexism.
Wow, that's
It was a complete takeover by the inmates of the asylum. I think it was Portland State University. I'm trying to remember. It's off the top of my head, but that was like the forefront of the modern absurdity.
hmm
And it's because professors and administrators weren't willing to stand up to the
yeah.
mob. They didn't have any reason to. They didn't.
hmm
I mean, intellectually or morally, they didn't have any core values
hmm
other than, oh, they want to be on the right side of history, whatever that is.
Right. Because I like the story that he tells about Cornell's provost, because he went to see the provost in the midst of this. He's just concerning a black student whose life had been threatened by a black
Yes.
faculty member when the student refused to participate in a demonstration. And of course, the provost was sympathetic. He's like, "Well, I understand," but he's like, "There's nothing I can do." He said he added that no university in the country could expel radical black students or dismiss the faculty members who incited them, presumably because the students at large would not permit it. I mean, if you
Yeah.
tried to do that in the midst of this, I mean, the whole campus would, riot. I mean, this is a little bit before they actively were threatening to bring guns to campus, or actually did bring guns to campus. And so it wasn't quite at that level yet, but they could see where things were going. It's like, what action do I take here? They were too unwilling to actually do anything. And he talks a little bit later about sort of the unwillingness to bring in like actual police from off campus by the administration. Oh, this is just something we should handle ourselves. And of course, if you had brought in the police maybe a little bit sooner, it wouldn't have gotten to such a drastic point. But it's yeah. I mean, I don't.
But we've seen that in the
Right,
last year with the anti-Israel or the
right.
anti-Jewish protests, where they said, well, if you bring in the police, that's just institutional racism.
Yeah,
And and you see these every once in a while, these interviews with you see a police body cam of some liberal not wanting to follow through on a report of an assault or a theft because it was a black or brown person. They didn't want
right,
to be part of the justice system,
right.
after the racist system or whatever. And so it's just a continuation. So
hmm
he's identified this a few decades ago, and we've just kind of gotten to the outer absurd limits. Although a big difference between then and now is that um, the people that are not part of those groups have become so um, docile that we don't think twice about. There's a African American student government, African American student recreation center,
hmm
or whatever you want to call it, where even though it's a public building, if I, as a 55, if we're talking about older, so maybe it wouldn't be appropriate for me as an older person to walk in, but let's say if I were an adjunct at that college, I shouldn't go into that building. And I know if I even walk into the building or into that part of it, then I'm going to be hassled and I'm
hmm
creating a problem, right? I'm
Right,
creating the problem
right.
just by my existence.
hmm
And so we don't see these confrontations like you would have in the 60s, because there are people that at the time were like, what? But now it's just accepted.
Yeah,
It's only now in late 2025 that people are like, well, you know what? Maybe we should just be Americans.
yeah,
And of course, then you have to define what an American is.
yeah. Well, I remember my undergrad had a what do they call them? A lavender graduation, which is like a separate ceremony for just like the gay people,
Oh,
like
really?
all the LGBT. Yeah, like the because they had posters up all about it. Of course, as they do, along with all of the like 15 LGBT holidays throughout the semester, where the student government would pay a bunch of money to hand out pride flags on campus. But the Lavender graduation, because it was like, if you go by a different name and aren't comfortable with your parents hearing that name or something, and so they just specifically cordoned off where it was like only lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, students should be at this graduation to make them feel safe. Um, it's just one of the most bizarre things, it's so strange.
It is.
Hmm.
It's so obviously patently discriminatory
Hmm.
and absurd.
Hmm.
But like, yeah. So this whole gender thing is just so absurd, but it's so crazy that when you're in the middle of it, you're like, "Am I the crazy one? Am
Right.
I looking around? Why are you applauding this? This
Hmm.
is not." Well, I'm not going to go into it, but the Norm
Hmm.
Macdonald joke about the parents being proud that their son is gay. You ever see that riff?
I don't know if I have.
It's not
Oh no,
safe for
yes, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, it's a
like,
good
that's
bit.
what you're proud of,
Yeah.
but it's a good point. It's like, but even Seinfeld picked up on the Rainbow Mafia
Right.
when they had the anti-AIDS march, and
Mm.
Kramer wouldn't put on the pin. Why didn't you
Hmm.
want to put on the pin? And so it's been going on for since the 1990s,
Yeah.
constantly, and it's ratcheting up. So
Hmm.
this author does a great job of explaining the basis for it in the mental background, and the lack of courage of the administrators that allowed this to move forward. And I love he mentions in 316 that it was a mixture of cowardice and moralism, not uncommon at the time. And I think
Hmm.
that's really what we're seeing with all of this. It's like they're cowards, but they're also moralizing.
Right.
And it's like, well, if this kind of like effeminate screeching, this
Hmm.
hysterics, talking about how we have to do this and we have to do that. No, if you want to do whatever you want to do, go do it,
Right.
on your own. Why do you have to do it around in public?
Yeah.
It's the exhibitionist thing that is
Hmm.
a big objection of mine, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of people.
Right. Because then he talks about that kind of on 317, because he says it was also no surprise that many of those professors who had been most eloquent in their sermons about the sanctity of the university and who had presented themselves as its consciences were among those who reacted, if not favorably, at least weakly to what was happening. They're like, oh, we need to learn from history and learn from our mistakes. Look at these times when academic freedom was under threat, and then they just completely capitulated or even supported, the demands of these crazy campus radicals. Um, and it's yeah, really ridiculous because he says, then on 318 to 319, he tells the story of a pious sermonizer who failed to speak out and who fancied himself a political philosopher. He says he wrote an article for the New York Times Magazine explaining why capitulation had been necessary at Cornell. The social contract, he averred, was about to be broken, and we would have returned to the state of nature, the war of all against all, the worst evil, so that anything to keep that from happening was justified. And he's literally admitting that like things were so out of control on the university, that things were so bad that complete lawlessness was about to break out. And instead of doing anything in reaction to that and trying to stop these students, the only solution is capitulation to say, okay, yeah, you have whatever you want, thereby setting the precedent for them to do that again in the future in case they want something else. Um,
Yeah.
Absolutely absurd.
And it's a violation of the contract law theory anyway. As the author points out,
Right.
if it's a contract law theory that we all have to agree that we're agreeing on it, then you can't you're not supposed to be forced to agree,
Hmm.
because then it really is the strongest prevails, or the all against all, or each against each other. So he even mentions that it's inconsistent. It
Hmm.
really is just cheap. It's just cheap moralizing and philosophizing, and without any real understanding of the values that underpin the philosophy, and also is cowardice. It's
Right.
really just comes down to, again, in universities at some point, somebody eventually will say enough. And like in Mizzou, they had a series of administrators. There was famously a faculty member that was screaming at a student reporter. They had protests on campus. This is when you're probably in middle school or whatever.
Hmm.
They had a huge decline in enrollment afterwards, but they let these people camp out on campus.
Right.
Then and they said, you know, you're not allowed in this area. What do you mean I'm not allowed in this area? Like a quad or whatever. You know, like we walked around Mizzou campus, it's so
Hmm.
wide open, you walk
Yeah.
anywhere. No, they like had it kind of roped off, and this faculty
Hmm.
member screaming at this guy, "You can't come in here. You're not allowed." He's like, "I'm a student here. What do you mean I'm not allowed?" And that person ended up, I don't know if she was fired, if she quit or whatever. But then they brought in a new administrator who just said, no, no more. And he didn't even do it in a mean way. He just no, no more. And it basically solved all the problems.
Yeah.
And there's been some a lot of violence in the city of Columbia recently, or growing violence, I guess you'd say, homelessness issues and that kind
Hmm.
of stuff, because the city government's lefty. And he came out publicly really blasting them for not doing their jobs.
Hmm.
And so it just takes somebody to say it.
Yeah.
It's in a position of authority, and it'll get fixed, you know. Anyway,
Hmm. Yeah, because then he talks about, okay, well, what were they protesting? You know, what was kind of the basis for it? And he says a lot of it was this sort of critical philosophy that we needed to incorporate these ideas in the university, that the university is so stringent and so restricting of freedom, right? It's restricting, just this idea of just European centric things. That's where you get the calls for, Western Civ has got to go, as sort of the most famous slogan.
yeah,
And he says, well, what were the results here? He says on 320, he says, I know of nothing positive coming from that period. It was an unmitigated disaster for them. I hear that the
yes,
good things were, quote, greater openness, less rigidity, freedom from authority, etc. But these have no content and express no view of what is wanted from a university education. And he says, then they just got rid of the entire old core curriculum, where you had to take a smattering of courses in the major divisions of knowledge that was abandoned. And he says, I really like this story too. He says, one professor of comparative literature, an assiduous importer of the latest Paris fashions, explained that these requirements taught little, really did not introduce students to the various disciplines and bored them. I admitted this to be true. He then expressed surprise at my unwillingness to give them up. It was because they were, I said, a threadbare reminiscence of the unity of knowledge, and provided an obstinate little hint that there are some things one must know about if one is to be educated. You don't replace something with nothing. And of course,
yes,
that's exactly what the point was, is you just replace it with nothing. Just a
yes,
further sort of, continuing the trend that he's described, the further sort of narrowing. You don't have to learn anything that's not immediately practically applicable to you. And then sort of this other sort of different stream of, well, why bother, learning about these subjects at all, regardless of if they are part of your major or not. Well, this is, European centric, this is Western centric. We need to boost these other voices. And his point is, well, even if it's not immediately relevant to you, this is important for you to know because you live in this society. And for you to
yeah,
not receive this education at the university, which is supposed to be a universal education, is absolutely ridiculous. I don't care if you're bored by it. You have to learn this,
yeah.
and you should.
And yeah, that's a great point he makes, because they were never proposing to say, okay, we're not going to teach this, we'll teach that. Other difficult course,
Hmm.
that will require sacrifice, that will require hard work, and it won't be fun. I mean,
Right.
but everything has to be entertainment. But yeah, that's exactly correct.
Hmm.
And it's amazing how much our university system has degraded over such a relatively short period of time, while funding has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
You know, and the costs have gone through the roof. So it's like all this taxpayer money is going into it. All these grants are going into it, but then the students are still coming out uh, burdened with debt.
Yeah.
It's such a weird pyramid scheme that at some point somebody's going to have the cojones to rip off the Band-Aid and you know, make everybody have sacrifices for a 2 year period to reset, and that's really
Right.
what's going to take.
Yeah.
And then whatever. But
Yeah.
I like how he also mentions the mythology of McCarthyism.
Hmm.
Like they're the heroes of this era. And he's making a point that they don't really achieve anything other than, like you said, and just or quoted from him or paraphrased him about getting rid of the standards uh, and the requirements. But that there's a mythology that they were fighting McCarthyism,
Hmm.
uh, and how they kept McCarthyism out of the universities. And McCarthyism never had anything to do with the universities. There was a big push, and of course, it became a cause celebre or whatever. It was because all the celebrities were commies.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many of them that were active communists. Now, in defense of some of the early communists, it was before it became obviously apparent that communism was a violent
Hmm.
and despicable political philosophy. In the teens, early 20s, it wouldn't have been crazy to be a socialist or communist. I'm talking about 19 teens, 1920s, because people didn't know about how brutal and violent and terrible the communist revolution was until some later time, and
Hmm.
because it was hidden from the public in the West, especially.
Yeah.
Uh, but a lot of them knew better, and there were a lot of people that were basically subversives, and so there was some basis for McCarthyism because there were communist spies within the FDR's administration, and it's been well documented, especially since the Iron Curtain dropped. We got access to their records
Hmm.
that the people that a lot of celebrities were saying were framed or wrongfully convicted and executed turned out, yep, they were spies for
Hmm.
the Soviets. It's
Yeah.
pretty really wild.
Yeah. I like his discussion then on 322 and 323, where he's
Ooh,
talking about like
I'm on 324.
oh, I apologize.
Go
I think
ahead.
this is an important point though, because he says like in the 1950s you had a really great period in American education.
Yes.
Both because standards were much higher, and you see that if you just look at I follow an account on Twitter, the Antigone Journal, which is a classics online publication. Every once in a while they'll publish like old tests that classics students had to take. And you really see like 1950s and prior, especially once you get into the 19th century, just how rigorous these tests were for like, high school age kids. It's pretty remarkable. But also because you had this influx of professors and academics from Europe following World War II.
Yes.
He
Right.
says like a lot of what you had to seek, in Europe was now coming into the U.S. And so you could have all of these professors in your backyard, and all these great sort of models of education and et cetera, were coming here. And he says, a lot of this was the decline of the continental universities and things like that. But it's important that we kind of just gave up on all of that in the 60s. We had all of the sort of building blocks to really make our universities as great as they possibly could be in the system of education that we had. But then we sort of pitched all that out for the idea of growth and self development in the 1960s that emerged as one of those changes that he mentions. It's not necessarily about the rigor and about learning universal education. It's about finding out who you are. Became sort of the idea of the university.
Yeah, they basically put it in a pile and lit it on fire.
Yeah, I think that's
It's like,
accurate.
oh, we got a great university, so let's put out the quad and put some gasoline on it. And poof, there it goes.
Mhm. Yeah. And then he talks about on 325 and
Yes.
326 about this easy morality, right? This idea sort of emerges, this other part of the mythology. One part was this horrible enemy of McCarthyism. The other part was, well, these students are just inherently moral people, and sort of the prized actions were speaking the truth, paying one's debts, respecting, or sorry, no, but
No, not that.
not that.
Yeah.
That was the perennial and unobtrusive view that morality consists in such things as telling the truth, paying one's debts, respecting one's parents, and doing no voluntary harm to anyone. That was the old view,
Yes.
but because those things are easy to say and hard to do. Now it's about speaking your mind and things like that, where you don't have to have any sort of sacrifice. You don't have to have any sort of challenge. It's these different things where you can say the good things, but then not actually do anything about it. It's just sort of this moral grandstanding became the norm
Yeah.
because you're platforming all of these young college students, and they don't really want to do any of the things that they're talking about.
Yeah, and he calls it the noble pose. Like you're
Hmm.
posing as if you have this morality. And he mentions this was not the morality that came into vogue in the 60s, talking about that morality that requires sacrifice.
Hmm.
He says there was vogue in the 60s, which was an altogether more histrionic version of moral conduct, the kind that characterizes heroes in extreme situations.
Hmm.
So, yeah, he really does a great job of describing that.
Hmm. And I like what he says too. He says, "Well, why did this happen?" He says a lot of it is the result of universities not teaching, the most instinctive of all questions. What is good, right? This idea emerges that has no place in the university. He says, if the university's teachers cannot teach about the good, why should the students not teach it? And so you have this complete sort of uprising from the students of, well, we have decided what is good. We don't care about these older models of what is good because you never bothered to teach us about them, and you don't even know what they are because
Yeah.
it's been so far removed from the university. It's no longer about what is good, what is true, what is beautiful. It's become this entirely different thing.
Yeah, he mentions, I don't know if you were familiar with it. I should have looked it up, but I ran out of time. He mentions David Easton's disgraceful presidential address to the American Political Science Association in 1966 says said all this. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
and he's talking about the behavioralism and I assume moral relativism, but are you familiar with that at all?
I don't know the address. I mean, I kind of get the gist of what he's talking about with the behavioralism, which he says, the social science founded on the fact-value distinction, devoted to the study of facts and contemptuous of philosophy. He says it had not, he admitted, been sufficiently sensitive to moral issues,
Yeah.
right? So you have this emergence, in the early 60s and a little bit before that of, it's just, we just need to focus on the facts, and you don't worry about the sort of the philosophical things. I think that's still very prominent in a lot of spheres
Yeah.
in education because then you have this other sort of form of capitulating, which is like, oh well, actually we do need to bring morals back into this, but a very different set of morals that is governed by these university radicals, and that essentially amounts to giving you whatever you want because you are the moral superiors to us, you
Mhm.
young students.
And he makes he segues from that into a discussion of indignation
Mm-hmm.
as a concept of what their main focus is and this is kind of interesting analysis of indignation because that's really they're so indignant
Mm-hmm.
about any sort of criticism or any sort of discussion that might upset them. And he says it is he says but all of this it says it is the most inimical to reason and hence to the university, which I thought was really
Mm-hmm.
interesting because I don't really think about people being indignant,
Mm-hmm.
in that deep of a way. But he's touched on something there. He really gets there. He obviously has spent a lot of time among them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and in some ways, he kind of reminds me of those stories that you see in the media periodically. We call them the gorillas in the mist stories
Mm-hmm.
about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I went to a MAGA rally, and the people were dressed in red hats and waving flags, and
Mm-hmm.
they actually weren't. Some of them were intelligent. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
in the jungles observing the group. Or what
Mm-hmm.
do you call them? A tribe or a group of what do you call a group uh, of monkeys or
Is it
gorillas?
is it a pack? A pack of chimpanzees?
Well,
Tribe? Is it a
it's really gorillas in the mist. So I don't know what a
yeah,
gorilla. Maybe it's a family. Maybe they just call
yeah,
it a family
maybe. I don't know.
or a clan. I don't know. But
I
anyway,
don't know.
I kind of get a little bit of a feel of that from him.
Mm-hmm.
That he's been among them so well he can observe them. It's almost like he's
Right.
a social scientist describing these strange creatures that he has to live
Mm-hmm.
among for obviously many years.
Right.
But then he kind of talks about how this was a weird kind of revolution because this one was anti-puritanical, which I
Mm-hmm.
thought was really also very insightful.
Mm-hmm.
With a make love, not war, and all this other kind of stuff, and drug use. It really was
Mm-hmm.
morality,
Yeah.
uh, which anyway, I don't know if you have any
Because
thoughts.
I like what he says there too. He says the word obscene was transferred out of sex into politics, right? Because now
Yeah,
everything on sort of the social side of things is 100% okay. Whatever you want to do, there's nothing obscene about any of your choices. Do whatever you want. However, if you're one of those conservatives politically, well, that's obscene. That's something we can't
right.
stand, right? And so
Yeah,
that's where the moral code sort of rests among the students of the university. Now it's, everything is fine in the social context, but those politicians, we can't, if you're politically conservative, we can't have that. Of course, that's still very much present
yeah.
at the university still today.
And
But then
he
he,
mentions, yeah, well, let me maybe say
Mhm.
something. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's what you're saying, but he talks about this revolution and how the partial list of sacrifices that the students had to make for this
Hmm.
moral position. One is they can live as they pleased,
Hmm.
with no sort of adult supervision over whatever behavior they had. Drugs became, regular activities. Sexual restrictions were gone. They were able to avoid military service, which at the time was a big deal because the draft was going on. And grade inflation, so they didn't really have to go to class. It says, never in the history has there been such a marvelous correspondence between the good and the pleasant.
Hmm.
Like, oh, we're doing great. We're doing really important, difficult work. It also turns out to be very pleasant for you.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a really clever way to look at it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was about to add. But I do like just a little bit before that, I think is characterizing exactly what he's talking about. He says the practices of the late Roman Empire were promoted with the moral fervor of early Christianity and the political idealism of Robespierre. Such a
Mm,
combination is, of course, impossible. It is play acting a role, and the students knew it. He
yeah.
says, like, you're combining all of these things. You're so fervent about it, like it is this religious movement, but it is just do whatever you want, sort of degeneracy, combined with like we are shaping an ideal society. And those
Yep.
things cannot be true all at the same time. But that was sort of the play they put on to sort of justify all of these things. Like, no, we have this whole moral framework. It is this, quasi-religious thing. It is this ideal thing. When in reality, it's just not at
And
all.
he mentions that, like they're play acting
Mhm.
as if it was made for TV, which
It
now is
was, yeah,
like, yeah, it was, and now it's for the internet, for the
yeah,
clicks.
oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's just, and because everybody has the internet on their hand, it's even more insidious
Hmm.
because everybody can play act as if they care about the people in Gaza. And by the way, where are all the ceasefire protesters? I guess are they all having parties now?
And no, they're protesting some more.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I saw some stuff about that. Well, it's not over. We didn't want just a ceasefire. We have to come to a solution to Gaza and the Palestinian state. So there's still protests, of course.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
it'll never end.
I
Um,
thought they were having parades for Trump today or
no,
something.
you
They
would
should
think
have it.
because secured a ceasefire and had a peace deal, but
So,
no, that's not what they wanted.
that's not
Um,
good.
but I do like on the point about sort of the attention seeking.
Mhm.
He says, they ended up in national magazines and things like that. But he says this is in the sort of the middle of 331. He says they took as their models Mao, Castro, and Che Guevara, promoters of equality, if you please, but surely not themselves equal to anyone. They
Yeah.
themselves want to be the leaders of a revolution of compassion. The great objects of their contempt and fury were the members of the American middle class, professionals, workers, white collar and blue, farmers, all of those vulgarians who made up the American majority who did not need or want either the compassion or the leadership of the students. He says,
Yes.
like, you have this weird, egalitarian, oh, I want to be like, Castro and Che Guevara, these great communists who really equalized everything, but I want to be the one to lead the revolution. And all
Yep.
of my anger, for some reason, is directed at the middle class who I'm allegedly supposed to be helping and promoting, just the average person. But of course, that is exactly where their ire is targeted, and they just want the fame and notoriety to an extent.
The only good thing, and that's not good. The only thing that I guess maybe ironic, but with all these revolutions, if the early revolutionaries, everybody who says I want a revolution, thinks that they're going to be leading a group of people in the
Hmm.
revolution. They never think that they're going to be the cannon fodder.
Right.
It's always that group that gets murdered first. Once they assume power,
Hmm.
that group of loudmouths are always murdered first
Hmm.
in communist revolutions every single time. They use their support. The people that are real killers will assume power and even be behind the scenes. Like Stalin was not front and center. He was a bank robber and a killer
Hmm.
before he was a communist. And then while he was a communist, that's how he was able to gain power because he was just violent. But he wasn't leading the revolution. He was there with it. And then
Hmm.
he consolidated power and killed all these other people
Right.
and assumed control.
Right.
So that I'm not saying that's good because no murder
Hmm.
or killing is good, but it's just so it's almost laughable how stupid they are,
Hmm.
how performative they are. They don't realize what it'll actually mean. Anyway,
Yeah.
so because it's just cheap posing,
Right.
they
Exactly.
think, well, I'm better because
Hmm.
I'm out here
Hmm.
in the vanguard.
Right.
I'm ahead of
Hmm.
where you're going to be later, and the people that are
Yeah.
behind you, they can,
Yeah.
you're just running
Hmm.
to the gallows.
Right. Right.
I don't want to follow you, but
Hmm.
if you drag me along, I guess I'm coming.
Yeah. And then he goes into this story after that. I really liked sort of towards the end of this chapter because he says starts on 332. He says, there's this little Greek civilization program that a group of
Yeah.
professors set up as all of this was sort of starting as kind of in opposition to all these currents that were going on in the university. And he says there were about a dozen enthusiastic freshmen. We'd been reading Plato's Republic during the entire year. And said we hadn't finished it when everything became chaotic. But the students still continued to meet on their own because they just loved the book. They really loved reading about Greek civilization, what Plato had to say. And so then he says that some of these students had gone out into the center of campus and were handing out flyers containing passages from the Republic. And I'll read this passage. It's a bit of a longer passage, but I thought it was really great. He says, "Do you too believe, as do the many," this is from the Dialogue of the Republic, "that certain young men are corrupted by sophists, and that there are certain sophists who in a private capacity corrupt to an extent worth mentioning? Isn't it rather the very men who say this who are the biggest sophists, who educate most perfectly, and who turn out young and old, men and women just the way they want them to be?" And the response is, "But when did they do that?" he said. And then Socrates continues. He says, "When, I said, many gathered together, sit down in assemblies, courts, theaters, army camps, or any other common meeting of a multitude, and with a great deal of uproar, blame some of the things said or done, and praise others, both in excess, shouting and clapping. And besides, the rocks in the very place surrounding them echo and redouble the uproar of blame and praise. Now, in such circumstances, as the saying goes, what do you suppose is the state of the young man's heart? Or what kind of private education will hold out for him and not be swept away by such blame and praise and go, borne by the flood, wherever it tends, so that he'll say the same things are noble and base as they do, practice what they practice, and be such as they are?"
Mhm.
Really just this cacophony and this just self-repeating sort of echoing cycle of, well, we want, this change to everything, not recognizing that they themselves are going to get swept up in this change. And if you sort of base all of your principles and sort of what the current whim and the desires are of this group of young people, this group of activists, well, all of that's going to go away too. You're not arguing for anything actually important or
Yes.
eternal in any meaningful way. You're not arguing for any sort of end, goal for what the university is. It's just this weird indignation, the sort of redress of supposed grievances, and you just want to do whatever you want. And that's not the basis on which to build an education. All that will immediately be swept away.
Yes. Yeah, and it's and yeah, I love that part too because it shows he was a good teacher as well.
Right.
But also, in a way, would showed the futility of trying to reason with the mob
Hmm.
too. It seemed like I think he said they had made copies of that excerpt and tried to hand that out to people
Hmm.
among the crowd. And I don't know that the people that were protesting then or protesting now have the capacity to understand it.
No.
So that I think it's a big problem,
Hmm.
which of course, he's gone to a great length in this book. But the fact that the university lets the mob control the direction of the university as opposed to the people that had enough interest and intellect to study Plato's Republic, including during a period of time when the university wasn't even functional, those should have been the focus of the
Right.
leadership and supported by the leadership, and the
Right.
rest should have been just kicked out.
Right.
There's a lot of people that are in the university that it would do them a lot of good to be expelled.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, why they're wasting their time
Hmm.
in a university setting because they're not studying or they're not capable of studying. It should be reserved uh, to the people that are able to understand and have the capacity to learn and excel at that level.
Hmm.
And you should have a smaller population of university students than we do now,
Right.
especially like I'm not talking about trade schools or community colleges, which have a huge market basis. I mean, it's
Hmm.
very very beneficial. But if you're going to have Ivy League schools um, and universities that excel by their very nature, they have to be exclusive intellectually.
Hmm.
And that has been lost. Although I have noticed that I think there's only one Ivy left that does not have mandatory test scores starting next year. I
Hmm.
think Columbia might be the last one, or is it Stanford? One of those big important universities. All the rest of them have reinstituted the tests,
Right. Yeah. I'm
which
just
was
waiting for,
bizarre
yeah.
when you were touring and especially when Jonah was going to college, which was what 3 years ago.
Hmm.
All state schools were saying, well, it's optional to take a test.
Yeah.
And still at Mizzou, it's test optional
Yeah.
this year. They said next
Hmm.
year will probably be going away, but you'd
Yeah.
have to do a different application and fill out a big ass essay. Um, but it's just bizarre.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I'm just hoping that eventually Princeton, their classics department, will bring back teaching or requiring Latin and Greek to get a classics degree, because that was dropped for like racial equity under that
and that
lens. It
doesn't
just
make any sense.
no.
Why is that have anything to do with
Hmm.
racial equity? What race cannot learn Greek or Latin? I mean, who is saying that?
Yeah.
And do they not know how denigrating that
Yeah.
is?
It's just
Of
ridiculous.
course they can learn it.
Hmm.
You know, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just it's insane. Just
Yeah.
insane.
But then he
I think
kind of concludes by sort of
yes,
looking at the present day, right? He says, now in 1987 is when he's talking, but he says, all of these people who led all these, quote unquote revolutions, they're now in their 40s. For
mm,
us now, they're really in their 70s or even 80s at
yes,
this point.
yes.
And a lot of them are
Mhm.
now like the administrators of a lot of these universities in some places.
Most
Um,
are retired. So
yeah,
you're
most
really
of them
talking
now.
about
Yeah,
Gen X.
yeah,
It's my generation that's actually these
right.
stupid administrators.
That's true. But he's saying like this group of people, these people who protested and were at the forefront of these things back in the 60s, they can look back and really just keep patting themselves on the back, right?
Yes.
And they don't really want to look at, what actually, made all these changes, but they say we made, great progress in relations between whites and blacks, that they played the key role in the civil rights movement. He says they don't want to discuss what was decisive. They don't want to talk about what was happening in the courts or elected officials or inspiration of the kind represented by Martin Luther King from within the community. He says it was really just us, and us in the vanguard, the forefront of all of these things, and by us protesting, like good, revolutionaries, that's what changed this country for the better. And so there's really been no self-reflection, and I think he's absolutely right about that. And there was no self-reflection in the parts of
Right.
the universities and of the generation that came after them, who kind of just
Still
accepted,
hasn't
well,
been.
yeah, there
Yeah.
still hasn't been.
Yeah.
It's still kind of acceptable. Of course, they did the right thing and they were pushing for all of these, equal treatment things. And of course, all of that was good to get rid of all of the rigor of the university and make it more about, self-development and improvement and things like that. It's still just this continual like patting on the back, right? Not necessarily from that generation, but from the people that they inspired and taught after that. And it's like this is what the ideal university student should be doing is, standing up and protesting about these things and not really caring, about what is actually in their education, right? It's still these social causes that are the most important part of the university. And if you're well developed in those, then that is what the university is for.
Yes. 100% yes. And I like this quote. It's on the bottom of 334. He's talking about how they inherited a system,
Hmm.
and but then they threw it away, like lit it on fire. He says they could waste the capital because they did not know they were living off of it. They
Hmm.
returned to the university, declared it bankrupt, and thereby bankrupted it. They abandoned the grand American liberal tradition of learning, and
Hmm.
that's just it in a nutshell. And he's so
Yeah.
right, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's there's the only reason that they could have done this was because they lived in such a society that allowed them to, and that had all of the education systems in place that it enabled the students to do that. And of course, in response, they tore it all down.
Yep,
That they had all of these, yeah, they had it all, and then it was wiped out completely.
yep,
But then
correct.
that brings us to the end of the chapter. Unless you have any other thoughts there.
No,
Well, there's only one last chapter, which is pretty long. We can
it's a
split
big
that.
long one though.
Yeah, we could probably split that in two and have there's a short afterword at the end talking about it at the end. We can stick that at the second half of the next or the second half of the last chapter. So we only have two episodes left, it looks like, in this season.
All right, well, we'll have to come up with our next season
Yeah.
topic.
I'm leaning towards Plato's Republic. I think Bloom has a translation that we might read, or we'll find a different one maybe. Um, but I know you've
Words is
complained about it
words.
a lot. Well, that's true, but the words are important how they translate them. And I'll try to follow along in the Greek version that I have. So maybe we'll actually get some language comments from me, make my classics degree worth something.
Mm.
But I think that'd
Is
be
it?
good.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm happy to reread it. Uh, it's been a long time,
Hmm.
so maybe I'll revisit it and think
Yeah.
it's the bee's knees.
Yeah. I still remember back in, I guess it was season one when we were first talking about all that, about you just complaining about how kind of pointless you thought it was to read it.
Yes, well, it is kind of pointless, but
Yeah.
I'm willing to
I think
sacrifice.
you might change your mind. I don't know. We'll see.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, I've gone through. We've been doing this for a few years,
Yeah.
um, and and I think I could blame or credit this podcast and these weekly discussions with
Mhm.
really kind of get me back into thinking about these things because
Yeah.
it's I would I've had a philosophy degree many years ago, and I think I think all men especially want to contemplate life's great mysteries from time to time. But to actually actively do it consistently for a couple of years kind of puts you in a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
And I've changed my mind on a couple things. I'm probably not a contract theory.
Yeah.
person with regard to the United States, which I was.
Yeah.
And I believe I think Orestes Bronson was
Hmm.
100% correct about,
Yeah.
what a nation is. And, Bloom didn't have to convince me of any of this. He's just, reaffirming, my already strongly held beliefs about the educational system, but it's a deeper explanation
Hmm.
and a neat perspective. So we've also had a number of debates about omniscient God and free
Hmm.
will. And I think he convinced me I was wrong about one thing. So yeah, it's been quite an interesting path.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, we're coming up, I think, on 5 years of doing it. I think
a
we started
long
in
time.
November of 2020.
Yes, it would be
So
your senior year in high school.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So 5 years. That's crazy.
yes, a long time to be doing this.
Yeah. And we've only read 12 books in that time.
So I'm working on some swag.
Oh, yeah.
What?
I forgot about that.
So something has been ordered,
Oh, what? You designed it yourself?
designed and ordered. But I don't know if we want to have other things of swagness.
Uh-huh.
I think I need to get something and ship it to you. Uh,
Okay.
this next thing, whenever it gets done, is going to be shipped to me.
What
I'm
what
thinking,
is it?
I think I want it to be a surprise, but I don't know. But I'm thinking about like ridiculous because like you can put a logo on anything,
Right.
I mean, if you look at like Vistaprint or
Hmm.
whatever, you could everything could be tagged
Hmm.
and ridiculous things like whistles, uh, you know, kazoos,
Uh-huh.
uh, other noisemakers, uh,
Right.
pencils,
Hmm.
bags, hats, shirts. Yeah, if you've ever been to one of those websites,
Right.
cups, you just had a cup, mugs.
Hmm.
So we've had a few T-shirts, but I
Hmm.
have T-shirts now.
Right.
I don't know if we need any more T-shirts. And if you do small batches of T-shirts, they're kind of expensive,
Yeah,
unless you
that's
do,
true.
to get the numbers up. And I don't want to have 250 shirts sit in a box in my basement. I think, smaller items can be given out
Right.
willy-nilly or
Right.
left places,
Right.
like you're seeding people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is this? Oh, I'll look up this oddly spelled Twitter account. So,
So,
so come up with some ideas.
okay, can you tell me what is on the mystery item that you've ordered, what the design is, or is that a secret?
Well, you have on the Twitter handle like a Unlimited Opinions logo.
Yes, that's true.
So that
Okay.
the name Unlimited Opinions and the Twitter handle
Oh, okay. Well, that's all right.
and our names.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I was worried you're gonna pull some absurd quote out of one of these
No,
episodes.
yeah, I was thinking about it, but I thought, well, um, I would only pull my quotes.
Hmm.
I think that was fair.
Oh, there you go.
So it's my generosity of spirit that kept me from
That's yeah,
putting a quote
that's
on there.
yeah, your
But
magnanimity.
I have to say, I know it's really stupid, but every time I look at my bookmark while I read it, I laugh out loud. I giggle. So I don't have it with me right now, though.
The Socrates on one side and then your opinion is
But then
wrong,
my
Mark Bishop.
quote
Yeah.
on the other side says the Socrates quote is something like, "The way to be a good person is to basically act as if you were a good person." I forget the
Mm-hmm.
articulating what I just said, and it says Socrates. It has like a
Hmm.
little picture of Socrates on it. And on the back it says, "Your opinion is wrong, Mark Bishop." And I just think that's just so funny.
It is pretty funny.
Just the arrogance to put a quote,
Hmm.
especially a stupid quote like that, on
Hmm.
the side of a bookmark that has Socrates on one side talking about how to be a good person, and then mine just it's a commentary on Socrates too.
Hmm.
It's a flip side. It's
It's absurd. It's really absurd.
brilliant in its stupidity and absurdity. I'm really proud of that. Maybe I'll just get a box of those and just start handing them out.
Just no advertising of the podcast, just
Nothing about the
unrelated. It's
podcast, just my quote and Socrates.
that'd be
Leave them,
pretty funny.
I can leave them in the courtrooms. Anytime I'm in the court, I should do that. I should have little bookmarks I just leave in courtrooms all across the side of the state.
Hmm. That'd be really funny. Be really stupid.
But
Really
yeah,
funny.
I mean, it wouldn't be bad. It's not insulting. It's not derogatory to anybody. It's just
Right.
stupid. People will think I'm weird,
Hmm.
but I don't know, tomato, tomato.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is you should come up with something that you think. I like the idea of a lot of little things. Like
Mm-hmm.
like a 3,000 box
Hmm.
items. Like so you could like be at a coffee shop and leave something behind. And it wouldn't be like trash.
Hmm.
But it could be trash. They could just throw it away and it wouldn't be a burden on anybody.
Right.
They might, like a magnet or something.
Right.
So give that some thought and
All
then
right. All right.
do a little
I
bit of
will.
marketing.
I will. All right. Well, do you have any other final thoughts for this
No, I
episode?
think that's good enough.
All right. Well, this has been season 12, episode 16 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
What is like the thing is Viva la Revolution?
Hmm.
What is that's like long live the revolution.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
Well, what's that same saying but death to the revolution?
Um,
Muerte
what,
de revolution or something?
would that be like Spanish, I guess? Yeah. Muerte, muerta, or something like that.
Well, maybe we can have like the Latin version of death to the revolution.
Hmm. All right.
Like not that we were wishing death on anybody, but
Yes.
that the revolution would be stopped.
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, Viva la Counter Revolution is a little bit murderous because the
Right.
counter revolution is usually at least as violent as the revolution.
That is true. That is
Uh,
true.
yes. All right, let's give it that some thought. Maybe we can throw that quote on there,
All right. We'll
or
think
another
about it.
one that you think is
Yeah.
better.
No, we'll see. I'll think. I'll give it some thought over the next
Yes.
few days.
What's a good memorable quote from you from these episodes?
That's a good question. I mean, I know when we first did the shirts, it was that is incredibly fascinating.
Yes. Yeah.
So
You did.
they're very fast, very interesting. Yeah, something along
Yeah.
those lines.
But that's like
Um,
self-deprecating.
yeah,
I want like a good, meaningful one.
I don't know if there's something I say often enough that.
It's not often. Just something brilliant that you've
Yeah,
said.
I don't
I
know.
probably should have been taking notes.
Mm. Well, it's
Well, we
all
should ask our
recorded.
listeners. We should ask
Yeah,
our.
there we go.
Well,
I'll have them
we
tweet
can
at us.
what we could do is we can run them through AI and ask
Mm.
Grok to pick out your best quote.
We could, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm stalling.
No, that's all right. Well, I've been Adam Bishop.
Still Mark Bishop.
You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions.
.com.
What?
.org. Oh.